I'm Reverend Eddie Anderson. I am the senior pastor of McCarty Memorial Christian Church and a civil rights activist in this community. And
I'm Rabbi Joel Simmonds. I am the executive director of the Jewish Center for Justice here in Los Angeles.
I have to first give a thank you to the Dorn Center for having us here. And every time I'm in this room, I think of Pop Chip Murray. And I have to say some of the work that we are doing today is an outgrowth of some of the things he said. I remember being in this room many years ago. It was when I was leading the Black Lives Matter movement in Los Angeles. And Pop Murray said, we need a declaration of interdependence. And he wouldn't let that go. He said we need a declaration of interdependence. And when we think about the work that Joel and I were about to describe, in many ways we are living out, if there was a declaration of interdependence, what would it cause us to do? What values would it have? What claim would it have on our communities? And so I want to start there around why we started doing this work, and then Joel and I will tell a story, for lack of better words, around how this work came to be and what we are doing now. Our story actually, and this is a good point around collaboration, that collaboration is based upon trust. Everyone knows that. I actually met Rabbi Joel many years ago. What was that, 2015?
A long time ago.
2015 maybe? And I met Rabbi Joel not doing activism work, not doing social justice work, but I met Rabbi Joel at a thing called InterSim. InterSim was where they brought together all the seminaries, Claremont, Fuller, AJR, Hebrew Union College, and they invited me to come and preach at this InterSim conference, and I was sick. And so I came, which meant that I hooped the whole sermon. And the rabbinical students said, "How did you do that? That's amazing! Like you brought in all of the interfaith things, but you said the sermon. You need to meet our professor," and their professor was Rabbi Joel. And so we started doing work then. And those were the initial seeds for the work that we would do later together. And so if you fast forward from 2015 to 2020, and I'm doing civil rights work, I'm doing work in the streets, and Rabbi Joel is doing his work, and he could tell you a little bit about his work with Jewish Center for Justice, and at the synagogues he is at. And 2020 comes, and it is March of 2020. I'll tell you the whole story. I'm supposed to be getting married the week of the shutdown. Week of the shutdown. And the government is saying you can't meet. And I got this big wedding planned. 400 guests coming to my church, everybody under the sun, shut down all the streets. We was ready to go. But I started looking at the news, and what I noticed was that this shutdown was going to last longer than anyone expected. Then I also noticed something else, that because of the work I've been doing, civil rights work and policy work, I have been a part of making sure we got rid of cash bail. I've been a part of making sure that Black people experiencing homelessness actually had a pathway to find housing in our community. I've been a part of making sure that the city redid how they did their linkage fees and how we actually allocated funds and money. I said this shutdown's gonna last longer, and if we learned anything from 2012 when Obama first was elected to office and we saw the recession, the Black and brown communities are gonna be hit harder. I also noticed there was a gap that Pop Murray was in fame, was not running the community as they used to run the community. That there wasn't too many community development corporations that were still had their pulse on the pain of the community. There was many doing programs, but there weren't many that would still have their pulse on the pain of the community. And so I looked and I said, well, there's 3 pain points that I know, that I've heard from community members, from sitting and listening and organizing in community. And the 3 pain points was, one was, if you live in South LA, my pastor in West Adams, Sugar Hill, depending on how far back you go in LA, I said, I've talked to enough elders in the community who have told me it is ridiculous that we don't have healthy organic food in our neighborhood. Backstory is that my wife, at the time, had just got through being the executive director for the LA Food Policy Council. And so she was trying to change grocery stores, liquor stores into healthy neighborhood markets. They were doing that work. And when I was talking to the store owners, I said, where do you get your food from? They said, Costco. I said, well, we could do better than that, right? We got Ron Phillips, we got all kind of people farming. We got to do something better. And then they tell me stories about having Dotsons in Leimert Park and how that used to be there and how that's no longer here anymore. And so we needed food. The second thing that I knew that we needed in a crisis like this was talking to young people, 18-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 24-year-olds in our community, sitting down with them and listening, and they will always come to the church and they will always say, Pastor, we see you on the news, we see you doing all this stuff, but there's no job. There's no job. Chip Murray used to say, the way that you stop a bullet is a job, right? And so there's no job. There's no job. So how do we get more jobs in the community? So I said, okay, we got to have more jobs in the community. Okay, so we got food, we got jobs, and then the young parents, and we have a preschool at our church, said to me, well, now they want me to be a teacher. I'm not a teacher, pastor. They want me to educate my kids, and how is that going to work? Now, living in LA, I don't know where all y'all live, but where I lived at the time in Jefferson Park, right down the street from here, one side of the street had broadband, the other side of the street had fiber, so internet speed isn't the same. It's called internet apartheid around here. And so I said, oh, well, if we don't educate our children, then we are actually building more prisons. Because we all know, maybe we all don't know, but research shows and activism work shows that we build prisons based upon 3rd grade reading levels. And so I said, okay, this pandemic has way more potential to impact our community than just we got to be at home and we may get sick. It means that there's already an epidemic of racism in our community, and it's going to be even worse because we won't recover at the same pace. And so at that point, I made a phone call. This is where my Joe comes in. I said, well, we need a community development corporation that can do this work, but my church can't do this. Not by myself. It doesn't matter how many resources or how many connections I have, I need a partner. And so I called Rabbi Joel. And I said to Rabbi Joel, I said, hey man, I gave him this argument that I just gave you all. And I said, hey, we need to start a CDC. To which I'll let Rabbi Joel tell his half of the story. Rabbi Joel says, oh sure, it's a pandemic, a CDC. He thought Center for Disease Control. And I said, no, Rabbi Joel. A CDC is a community development corporation. It is how Black and brown communities make sure that we have access to the community. And so I'll let Joel tell this part of the story, then we'll go a little further.
I'm sitting at home and we have CNN on and MSNBC on, and again, every day it's the updates from the CDC, and Pastor Eddie calls me up, and listen, when Pastor Eddie calls me up, I say yes. Like, right, he could just say yes, and then he tells me what I'm saying yes to. So he's like, we're gonna start a CDC, and I'm like, listen, we did really well together at his seminary and my seminary in Bible class and whatnot, but like, I'm not a doctor. And so then he started to really tell me about the community development corporations. And then we really started to look around. And he talked to me about the Great Recession of 2008 and how long it took for Black and brown communities to really come up from it. And then we started to look at the community around us at the time. Now keep in mind, remember, in April of 2020, when the government came out with the PPP loans, right? And we were all struggling to sign online at 6 o'clock in the morning. And if we remember, by the time that many of us signed online, it was closed, right? And the big corporations and the big organizations that had entire finance teams, the ones who could actually do well during the pandemic, the ones who could survive, they were the ones that got the loans first. And then the community that did not have a finance team and maybe had a hard time signing online and maybe did not have all the documents in place, we were left behind. And Pastor Eddie said to me, this is why we need to start this CDC, right? Because at the end of the day, the people who are always left behind are going to be left even further behind. And then, so we looked at that moment, right? That was a very real data point in real time. That the, justice-oriented stuff doesn't really get to the people who are in need at the moment, right? And it makes for a good headline, and it makes for a good press release. But the people who are really in need in the moment are not getting the funding. And then we also looked at where the stock market hit, right? And we assumed that there was this great economic crisis. But the reality was, and all the research showed us, that big private equity and big hedge funds and whatnot were just holding their money on the sidelines. So the money wasn't really going anywhere. They were just waiting for the opportunity. And what was that opportunity? Seeing neighborhoods crash so they could come in with the money that they had on the sidelines and buy a cheap property and redevelop. And so the creation of the CDC in that moment was really to prevent the money that was waiting on the sidelines, waiting for the crash to come on in. And what we realized that we needed to do is that we needed to get in there first. We needed to get in there first with capital from the community, capital from the state, and say, no, we're not doing this time. And we needed to have solidarity and shared understanding. And I want to say, in a moment of vulnerability, I had no idea that this was happening. Now, I run an organization, the Jewish Center for Justice, and it wasn't until this moment that Pastor Eddie truly opened my eyes that I was really dealing with justice from 30,000 feet. Spending my time in Sacramento, spending my time in DC, spending my time at City Hall, dealing with legislation and policy. And that's important. But that was really at 30,000 feet. Come to ground level. And the policy that we pass versus the implementation are light years away from each other. Right? Really good press releases when we pass this policy. But how does that money actually get to the community in need? And then, and I want to pass it over to Pastor Eddie at this moment. I remember years ago when we were working on predatory payday lending. And I would do bus tours with members of my community. And I would drive them around the west side of Los Angeles. And we would not see one predatory payday lending site. And then we would go across town. And you would see liquor store, payday lending. Liquor store, payday lending. And then we would go back. And I would say, look at the grocery stores. And you would see the Whole Foods and the Trader Joe's and the Ralph's and the Vons and the organic ones that cost more than rent. And then we would go back to town. And what would we see again? Payday lending in liquor stores, payday lending in liquor stores. And the idea that the need for healthy organic food in the city and looking at all this empty space, we're like, we can turn this. We can turn this desert into a productive way to truly grow food in the community, for the community, by the community. And that's when this really started.
So Joel and I are talking about this partnership, and so for your technical words, that was all need assessment work. So Joel and I talked about this partnership, and I said, well, if we're going to do this, especially in a climate of crisis, then we need government. right? We need to create a public-private partnership for what we're doing. And so this is what I would say to folks who are creating CDCs or doing development work, is that I, at that moment, called my state senator. And I called my state senator and I said to my state senator, here's the need, here's what we want to do, can we do it in your district? Because I knew that if we got buy-in from the state government that this needs to happen and they see the need as well, then we could actually, as the young people say, we can actually cook, right? We could actually do something in the community, right? And so I met with my state senator and I told her, I said, I want to give you my Joseph plan. I said, I want to give you a Joseph plan because what's going to happen is that there's going to be a famine in our communities when the recovery happens. Here's how we solve it, and we're going to do it together, Black and Jewish. Why Black and Jewish? A lot of people ask us this question, why Black and Jewish? I went to Morehouse College. I'm a Morehouse man. And one thing that you learn about the civil rights movement is that when Black people were getting free, we had some helpers. We had some help. We had some co-conspirators. And what we don't often like to talk about back in the day was that it was a lot of our Jewish sisters and brothers who were co-conspirators with us. And how they were there at Niagara Seneca Falls. They were there when we had the bootleg, and all of the Jewish folks who've always been with us, right? It's more than just Heschel and King walking across Edmund Pettus Bridge, right? And so I said it's going to be Black and Jewish because it is a historical partnership that, yes, we know has fractured after the 80s. It's not, me and Joel aren't, we know after the 80s it turned into, I come to your church on King Day, and you come to mine on the high holidays, and we'll see you next year. We know how it actually plays out. But we said there could be something deeper that we can do together. And so that's why it's Black and Jewish. It's a historical connection, but it's also, there's not a Black church without an Exodus narrative. Okay? And so there is work that we could do on a theological level around our values in community as we try to repair the body of the world, right? Repair the world, repair the broken body of God among us. So we start doing this work. The state buys in to what we are doing. And this is the power of vision, implementation, and a team. Is that, I'm going to say this number because it already is in the papers. Many years ago, we give them the vision of these three main areas: food, workforce development, and education. We go back and show them it's a historical model that works. So we talk about how the food, we're going to disrupt the food desert, how we do education using the Freedom Schools model that Marian Wright Edelman started, but bring it to scale. How we do workforce development and do whole person care, 18 to 24-year-olds, based upon the data we've heard from young people. And the state says, we believe in you, and gave us $7 million. $7 million. Now, this is another part, because I know how to do activism work. I've attended some of these workshops that Cecil Murray and Reverend Juba and Mark Whitlock and all them put on. But when they said $7 million, I said, oh, great. But
what?
My brothers work on Wall Street. And they said, if you get $7 million, you need to make sure that money works for you.
Right. That's right.
All right, this is another part of partnership. And I don't know if Joe was going to talk about this today.
I'll talk about
it. But I said, all right, so I called Joe and I said, look, Joe, I'll talk to the state, and we gonna get $7 million. You got anybody we can bank with that could give us some help? My community, I don't know nobody in the Black community that know what to do with this. And then Joel says,
ask the Jew. No. So the check comes, and I look at the check, and I call up a few people, and I'm like, and I was like really nervous, right? And so I was like, do I just like walk into Chase? And they're like, no, do not walk into Chase. And so this is when we looked at the resources of our community. And I called up one of my board members who called a partner, and they said, we're going to take care of you. And they really negotiated on behalf of us to a number of banks to get us a higher interest rate so that we can then start making money off the original money, right? And then diversifying the money throughout the country so that it wasn't just in one bank, because as we've also seen through all these crashes, banks can go down. And so what we had to do is we had to grow the money by simply putting it in to the right places so that we can then start to budget off the interest of the original payment. Right? And so part of the partnership is looking into the community, looking at the resources that we have, and really saying to the community, like, your expertise, like, you can use that for good by simply doing something that's going to take you 20 minutes that could take us 20 months. Right? So really locking in and working with them and saying, help us in this regard and teach us how to do this in the positive way. And then I think it also goes one step further, right? In that by nature of the two of us being clergy, we're a trusted source in the community at a time in which trust in institutions, organizations, banks, and government is at an all-time low. And we actually use that to our advantage by saying that to banks and institutions and government, saying, your trust is at an all-time low, our trust is at an all-time high. We need to be able to work together so that we can actually accomplish the shared goal. And so it really is about that trust, that people will come to us with their secrets, with their financial issues, with their vision and with their needs. And if we send them out with a Bible verse, we're not doing the totality of the work that we know that we can do. Amen. So by us learning how to really go beyond the theology, and about the shared partnership of, and again, yes, we know about the 80s and beyond. And we know some of that work some of the fracture was internal. And in my opinion, a lot of the fracture was external, right? That when the Black and the Jewish community are together, it scares a lot of people at the top. It scares a lot of people who look at us and say, uh-oh, they're working together, right? And so it's better for the systems of oppression to say, Blacks and Jews, don't work together. You don't like each other. But when we actually say, no, that's not how it's going to work. And then, as Pastor Eddie said, right, we have the model of King and of Heschel, right? And we have the model there. And now we have to create that model in a new way. Marching is amazing. Marching to the bank to cash a check and to be tied in solidarity with capital to reinvent the community, right? That's the 2026 model. Right? Because again, once you're tied with capital, once you're tied with bylaws, right? Yeah. Once you're tied in an organization, whatever happens out there that tries to pull us apart, it's like, okay, we got to sit and work it out because we're not going anywhere, right? We have bylaws, we have an organization, we have a board, we have shared capital. And when you have those grass tops relationships, what are the grass tops? My rabbi and my pastor are such good friends, they take a picture together. When something happens in the community, well, we can just stop talking. But when we have shared resources, we can't stop talking.
And so what do we do with these resources is the question. I told you about the 3 areas, and so we get to work, right? So we become trusted partners of our community. And so what does that mean? It means that, we got the money in the public-private partnership, and we actually re-granted majority of that money. Yes. We reinvested that money. Now, when we're talking about economic development, how do you do economic development in a way that empowers community, but also allows you to be sustainable? That's the big question. So we do it in a couple of ways. If we're going to talk about urban farming and agriculture and how to create a local supply chain, we first thought, who are the largest landowners in South LA? Churches. Church are the largest landowner in South LA. So Rabbi Joel and I first thought when we re-granted the money or invested the money was we looked at churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples first. After that, we looked at schools to figure out what schools could we invest in. And then after that, we looked at community gardens and local urban farmers in our community. And we did that through an open process. And then we created a community board to re-grant that money. Through that process, we re-granted over $1 million back to the community, and we invested in that time alone in over 18 urban farms and gardens. And what we did though, we went back to those folks and gave them technical assistance, which means that we created 50 jobs out of those 18 farms and gardens, right? So now you have farmers in community who are able to start growing food, and they have technical assistance and support to do that work. This is all phase one of the work. We have schools that are now doing that work. First AME is one of the churches that is growing a garden. Park Hills is growing a garden. St. Mark at Epworth, they're growing a garden, right? So we're growing the food, right? And while we're doing that work, we then look to what was the other area we heard? Jobs. Create a program. All of our things have titles that also, it's like in Jewish organizations, so they have cool titles like Freedom Farms or Project Jubilee or Freedom Schools, right? It all is around that, so they were teaching those things, right? So then workforce development. We took 18 to 24-year-olds in community, and we said, well, what would it mean to have whole person care in workforce development? What is your unique differentiator, right, when you're doing this work? So our unique differentiator is that we not only do life skills, we wrote our own curriculum for life skills, but we also do case management, we also do therapy, and then they also work 3 days out the week to learn a skill. And career pathways that are actually movement trades. So they're learning how to do property maintenance. They're learning construction. They're learning how to do landscaping. They're learning how to do urban farming as well. And so as they're building that, we're thinking, as we're building this, we're saying, all right, we have the farming with workforce development, and we're paying them the whole way through. Why? Because you can't, if I'm paying you to get well, right? But I'm paying you to get well, but I'm also teaching you how to do financial literacy. I'm also teaching you how to do stress management. I'm also teaching you how to keep a job, right? And so we're doing that process. And one of the stories out of that I love to share, the first time, the first cohort that we had was a young man came, we're gonna call him Terrence. I don't know if you want to tell his real name. We're gonna call him Terrence. And Terrence is a part of our program. And Terrence comes to me and he says, Pastor, I gotta tell you something. I said, what you gotta tell me? He says, the apartment building I live in is in a rival gang's area. They wanna kill me. I said, all right, Terrence, we wanna make sure you come here. I'm gonna get you safe passage. So then I had to call the community members because you had to build those relationships to get safe passage, right? So Terrence now got safe passage to come to the program. We paying him to get well. And one day Terrence comes late to work, life skills class. And I said, Terrence, you're supposed to be here on time, man. I'm gonna have to dock your pay. Why are you late? He goes, well, Pastor, here's the thing, right? My car didn't have gas. And I saw some people walking down the street. I was gonna rob them. But then I thought Pastor wouldn't like me robbing these people to come to this program. So I had to take the bus to get here. So that's why I'm late. And I said, well, I'm glad you took the bus. I'm gonna get you an Uber home and we're gonna get some gas for your car, but you're gonna be good. And then Terrence in the program became a truck driver and was able to move out of the state. We got him his first shirt, whatever. So he moved out of the state, and now Terrence is living his life differently. Because he went through a program that invested in him. So workforce development was the piece. And so we're doing this work together and we're reinvesting in the community. And now, I'm Pastor Rabbi Joe again in a second to talk about how we also bridge JCJ and bring young people to it. But as we're doing this work in community, something clicked for me. And what clicked for me is that everyone in LA pretty much knows what homeboy is, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I started asking the homies, I said, well, if they got a homeboy on the east side, why don't we have something similar on the south side? What, if we are doing community development and economic development, why can't we do something similar? So we all know we want to sell this food, but what if we actually hire the young people to work to actually help move the food and sell the food? So we created a social enterprise called the Freedom Farms Collective, based upon cooperative economics. Cooperative economics meaning that we aggregate the food from the farms. That food, it happens in multiple ways. One, we built a nursery out from our Freedom Farms, which meant we built the plant plugs. We then take those plant plugs and we give them to the farmers so they can grow food. The food is now culturally relevant because they follow the migration paths of Black people and Latinx people and how they got here. And now you have food that you wouldn't have normally in LA, like, you know, Mississippi collard green and Alabama greens and mustards and Scotch bonnet peppers and all this kind of stuff, right? So we give that food, we give those plant plugs to the farmers. They grow it, and then here's the investment part. We go back and buy it from them. Right? We close the loop. We buy it from them, and then we take that food and sell that food back to the local restaurants and grocery stores. Right? And so all of that work, though, is done by young people that we have now hired from our community. So see how it works? It's a closed loop system around making sure we can stop gentrification, making sure that we are owners of our own land, making sure that people actually have a living wage job with some benefits. We give benefits as a nonprofit and community, but it also gives people more dignity, right? So if you go to With Love Market, which is over here off Vermont, right, they have a whole fridge that says Freedom Farms. And in that fridge is food from our local farms that a 22-year-old woman who went through our program drives over there, that another 24-year-old works in the farm to help harvest the food for, right? And it's a closed loop circle, which now we're feeding our community. It's what Chip Murray says, he says, own the pond. Right? It's a slow process. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we have figured it out and that every restaurant and every grocery store wants to work with us. Nah, you got to prove yourself. Yeah. But we are in the process of doing that. But as we are proving ourselves, we had another idea, which is I kept hearing from community members, why don't we have a grocery store in our neighborhood? Yeah. So guess what we're doing? We are building a grocery store in Leimert Park. Now, everyone's like, oh, we gotta like, so it's like, oh, you gotta write the book on how you did this. I said, nah, you gotta have like $4 million in the bank to go build a grocery store. You just can't build a grocery store, but you can reverse engineer it. So that's the plan. That once the grocery store is open and is running, then we can reverse engineer how we did it so that other communities in our community can start doing that. But as we're doing all that work, for cooperative economics, we are then also making sure it's sustainable. And so when Sukkot comes, Rabbi Joel brings young people to our gardens, and he can talk about how that works.
And so I want to talk about two things. One, about climate justice in regards to this, and then also two, about the reimbursement grant process as well. So one, climate justice, for those of us that live here in the city of LA, all you got to do in the last few years is look around and all the hills are burning. And then when you go outside of LA, when you even go outside of California, we're in a real crisis here with our farms. And so now more than ever, is there a need to really triple and quadruple invest in urban farming, right? Because when you look at the fields are burning in this moment, right? And investing in these areas is very dangerous, right? But a lot here and a lot there, that really has to be a part of the future. So we are also looking at the fact that like, this is what the future is going to entail, right? We cannot just rely on the Nebraskas and the Colorados and the Arizonas in that open area, because we also see what's happening there right now. So that's one major aspect. Two, and this is something that we've actually, talked about the research here, and we have expressed our disappointment to the state and to other entities in this regard. We received, one of our first grants was a reimbursement grant. And the state's very happy to talk about reimbursement grants. Well, the problem with the reimbursement grant is you have to put out a significant amount of capital at the beginning. And so there are many, many organizations and entities out there that we need a grant. We don't have the money to do a reimbursement grant. And so there's all of these programs out there by saying, you do the work and then submit us the receipts. And it's, well, we can't even get to the process of submitting the receipts, right? So part of this program as well is doing the research, being in partnership, and then saying, you can't keep doing this reimbursement grant process, right? Because so many of the groups that need the money do not have the capital to start with. And so then the next element here is bringing in the young people, bringing in the next generation, right? Showing, not just telling, right? Showing the farming, right? Having people re-engage with our ancestral narrative, right? We both come from traditions of farming. We both come from traditions of forced farming, and helping our people to get back into that regard in the city, connecting with it. And then to Pastor Eddie's point about, the reinvention or the 2.0 of the homeboy idea, is that now what we want to do, and this is where my community comes in, is saying, okay, who are we going to hire, right? When we want to fix our HVAC system, are we just going to go to what first thing that comes up in Google, or are we going to go to a trusted source? Bring them across town and start creating an economy and start creating an industry for that. Or, my organization had an event last night. And at our event, we have a number of tables. And what are we going to do? You're going to go to the local florist and get a centerpiece. And we said, no. We're going to get our centerpieces from PFGLA. We are going to get the herbs that we grow, and that is going to be the centerpiece. And so we are really looking at how do we take the good work that we do and not just tell the story, but show the story. And then I think for a lot of us, both on this recording and in this room, this is where grants and foundations and community funding comes in, right? This is when we can really tell the story that proven partnership, reinvesting in the community, this is what you want to fund. Right? Because there is billions of dollars within the community that wants to fund houses of worship, that wants to fund 501c3s. The problem is, it's the established ones that always get the funding first, because they have the good material, they have the books, because they're able to afford the good bookkeepers. And the problem is, if we're always funding the established legacy tier ones, then those of us that are truly on the ground in the community are not getting that level of funding. So what we want to be able to do is show, not just tell, show through this partnership that the legacy organizations are doing just fine. But those of us that are truly on the ground, that are working with people that have the stories to tell, this is how we do the funding, right? So it is also about, as we're talking about this economic development here, it is working with foundations to show them that we are the ones on the ground, we are the trusted ones.
And we're going to close here, but I'll say this. The reason why the organization is called Partnership for Growth is that we made a commitment that if we're going to start this organization in partnership, then every program, every work that we do, we'll also do it in partnership with community. So what does that mean for your economic development model? If that everything that you do it in partnership. What does that mean for us? That means the workforce development, that all of our trainees, we sub-grant to other organizations to come in so that we can share their partnership. That means that in the cooperative economics around farming, we partner with the farms and give them double down on technical assistance and money and help create jobs for those farms, or refrigeration, or help them become up to code with the USDA to do that work. It means that when we do freedom schools, that we partner almost exclusively with churches in the community to make sure that that youth program is now at their church as well, and they can leverage that to move forward. And then we help them create partnerships in the neighborhood as well. So for instance, at Park Hills, in View Park, Park Hills Church, they have a farm. They sell some of their food, but that farm, that's the older congregation, right? And the pastor says, well, I want to make sure that this farm is good for the community as well. Well, people stop by all the time now and look at that farm, but now on 2 days out the week, the elementary school down the street brings the kids from the elementary school down to the farm, which now creates a partnership for the church, right? To continue to have another life source for their community. It's partnership. And that is how we have been able to become sustainable. Is it a perfect model? No. Is it working? Yes. Do we need to raise more money? Absolutely.
Every day.
Because people also get shocked that, oh, you actually did the thing you said you're going to do and you gave the money. To date, we've given out or reinvested in the community $4 million. Right? So.
And we've hired a staff.
We've hired $4 million. We've hired a staff of 13, all women of color. And then we have the social enterprise, which we're hiring young people in. And we make sure that we get placement for young people as well. And then we go back to these farms and other businesses. So for instance, Tony Jolly has Aura Cafe in Leimert Park. He wants to expand his business. He needs a partner to do that, to expand his business. Well, we stepped in and we said, all right, we'll use our 501c3. We'll use our balance sheet to help you get what you need. And now he's able to purchase a new building, and we're going to create a cafe, another cafe, and hire more people, young people, to do that work. And that's how, when you go to the Olympics in 2 years, and you see coffee carts at metro stations, that's going to be young people who went through the program that we put the capital up and raised the money for to make sure we have those jobs in community, right? It's the same thing in Leimert Park where SON Books, they left. And there was talk around another Black bookstore coming to Leimert Park called Lore. And they came to us and said, we need a nonprofit partner who gets the vision and that's willing to invest. And I said, say less. We already do educational work. Why it makes sense for us to invest in making sure there's a Black bookstore in Leimert Park if we're going to call it the Black center of town. So we invested in the bookstore to make sure they had the capital that they need to buy the inventory that they need to actually have a bookstore, right? And now when you're doing economic development, the way this works is, for us, we create equity agreements where we have patient capital. That's what we call it. Right? A normal development corporation will come in and say, we would invest in your business, but we need our ROI in the next 5 years.
Can't do that.
We understand that we're going to be raising, Rabbi Joel and us, our job got a lot harder. We're going to be raising money for the next 5 to 6 years because we're not getting that money back from these businesses right away. But we believe in the community enough, and we've heard the community enough, and we continue to survey the community enough that we will make our balance sheet go down and us work harder so that the community has their needs met. And that's how we do our economic development and community in partnership with all of you.
And I just want to say one more thing about this partnership. As you engage in this work, it is extremely important to find a partner who you trust completely, but are also very different from. Pastor Eddie and I think in very different ways, but we trust each other. And so we are able to have the hard conversations, right? And we're able to push each other. And we're able to press on the gas and press on the brake because we have that deep trust. If we thought the same way, it would be very difficult. We would either go too fast or we would go too slow. And so I just want to make it clear that we have an amazing amount of trust in each other, and we think and we operate in different ways, and that's why it works. Because you need that kind of a partnership in which don't find someone who thinks like you. Find someone that you trust. And that's how you get to that next level. Thank you.